Today I am having a noodle dish called ruganmian. Ruganmian is so ru means hot, gan means dry, and mian means noodles. So ruganmian means hot, dry noodles. This is a dish that has, it's kind of stir-fried noodles, but they're not really stir-fried. They just have a bit of a sauce poured on them. It's not much sauce, so it's kind of like a peanutty, sesame, savory sauce. But it doesn't have a lot of sauce, and like the noodles are fairly dry. That's why they're called dry noodles. Typically in Chinese cuisine, noodles are served in some kind of a soup with broth. So even when you say dry noodles, it doesn't necessarily mean they're like dry. It just means they're not in a soup. And the way this is served is it's a bunch of noodles with some sauce, and then you can get toppings on it. So I go all out and get, well, I got an egg. This is called a ludan. Lu means stewed. So this is kind of like it's a boiled egg, like a hard-boiled egg, but it's been stewed in like a soy sauce mixture. And so if you bite into it, you can see that it's kind of a brown color. It's taken on the color of the soy sauce. It basically tastes like a hard-boiled egg, but with a bit more kind of like soy sauce, salty, savory flavor added. That I get just to have on the side. I just like eating it. It tastes good. I like that quite a bit more than just a plain hard-boiled egg. There are a lot of different kinds of sort of what in the West we would call a hard-boiled egg. We in America or England or somewhere, like, we basically just have a hard-boiled egg. But in China, they have a whole bunch of different ones that have been prepared different ways. So they're basically all like hard-boiled to begin with. And then there are certain ones. There's a tea egg where they soak it in tea. There's this one where it's kind of stewed in a soy sauce broth. There are several other ways of doing it as well. They get weirder and weirder. Those two are the sort of normal ones that pretty much everyone will like. As you go on other ways, they get into fermented eggs and things like that get pretty weird, and a lot of Westerners find them pretty strange. Maybe another time I'll order some of those and show you those. But then on my noodles, I go all out and get like every kind of meat imaginable. So it's got this is ground pork, chicken, pulled chicken, and beef slices. So I go, typically you would have this with no meat or with like one choice of meat, but I really like meat, so I just order it with all of them. Then what you do is you just kind of mix it all together. Doesn't come mixed. The noodles have this sauce on it, so you can see kind of they've got like a sort of brown pasty kind of sauce. So it's not like a broth type sauce. It's more like a paste kind of sauce. Oh, and then I also often get it with these. This is a green bean. These are pickled green beans that they then chop up into little bits, and they use it as a condiment kind of thing. You can get that with a lot of different dishes. That's not specific to this dish. That's just a common condiment that's used as a topping for various dishes. So the basic dish here is the the ruganmian, and it's called yuanwer. Yuanwer is original flavor, so just standard flavor. But then I get it with the extra stuff. So I get jisu is chicken, ji is chicken, su is strips, or not really strips, something that's been pulled apart. So like pulled chicken. And then neuro PR. PR means a piece of something that's fairly flat. So this is kind of flat sliced beef. This actually isn't the best example because this is kind of triangular, but most of it, it's like beef that's been sliced into slices. That's called PR. This is a better example. You can see how this is kind of like a slice of beef. And then the pork is just ground pork with it's kind of been done like the way you make kind of a beef bolognese sauce. It's been stewed down for quite a long time until you have like a ground beef that's kind of mixed in with its own sauce. But it's a bit thicker than that. So it's or actually maybe a good example would be like Taco Bell taco meat. That type of where it's like ground meat that is cooked in a sauce. It's mostly ground meat, but it also has a bit of a sauce with it. But this is pork, ground pork. And typically you would get this noodle dish with one of those meats as a topping. Like I said, I like a lot of meat and just go extravagant. It's not that much extra to add the different meats to it, so I just get all of them. The sauce on it it's a type of peanut sauce. It's a pretty strong peanut flavor, and it's quite salty. So the real unusual thing about this dish is that it doesn't have any broth with it. I suppose when you have stir-fried noodles, they're not putting broth in that either. But in general, most preparations of noodles in China are with some kind of a broth, some kind of a soup. So like, for example, if you say beef noodles in Chinese, you don't say it's a soup, you just say beef noodles. That means beef noodle soup. And it's just understood that it has a soup with it because that's just how you serve noodles. This dish is not particularly local to the area where I live. It's from more down into like central China. I don't remember the exact place that it's sort of typified of. But it's quite popular all over the country, and you can get there are restaurants that serve it pretty much everywhere. But this isn't something that like a local cuisine restaurant here would serve. You have to go to a restaurant that specializes in this kind of dish. I believe this is quite a popular, both a breakfast and a lunch in many places. The sauce on it is very typical of peanut type sauces. It coats the whole inside of your mouth with that peanut flavor. So it's quite pleasant if you like the taste of peanuts, of course. If you're not into peanuts, this might not be the right dish for you. However, although they do make other styles of this noodle with different sauces. This is the most common. There are styles that are more like spicy versions that use like a chili oil paste and things like that. I don't particularly like those as much. I quite like peanuts, so for me, like, it's not that I dislike those other ones. It's just like I really like peanuts, so this kind of like stands out for me. Had a really good flavor. I also order it with extra noodles, so this is quite a large pot of noodles. The typical serving size would be about half as big as this, but I get it. I'm a big growing boy, so I get all the extra meat and double noodles. If I'm not feeling very hungry, I'll just get the single serving of noodles, but today I'm fairly hungry. There are also quite a few other little topping things that are on this. Trying to find a piece of it. So I order it extra with the pickled green beans, swan doujiao. Doujiao is green beans, and swan means acid, but it's often used if you have a pickle that's done using vinegar. It'll usually be called swan, and then whatever. So like typical like Western cucumber pickles. Cucumber is huanghua, and you would just say swan huanghua. So like swan, just if you put it before the name of a vegetable or a food item, then it just means pickled. That pickled in vinegar. The more popular style. Oh, I dropped a noodle. The more popular style of pickling here is with salt. So sometimes they'll have a different word if it's salt pickled. But usually things are if it's vinegar pickled, then it'll be swan. And even some things that are pickled more with salt, but with just a little bit of vinegar, they'll still call that swan. For example, the Chinese version of so in Japan or not in Japan, in Korea they have kimchi, which is like pickled cabbage, and in Germany they have sauerkraut, which is pickled cabbage. In this part of China, they have a thing called swansai. Sai just means vegetable, but typically if you say just vegetable like that, it refers to the white cabbage that they have. They have kind of it's related to a Napa cabbage. It's not a head of cabbage, it's like a long leaf cabbage. It's related to Napa cabbage, but slightly different. It's a white cabbage. That's the most common vegetable in this part of China. And when they pickle that, it's typically a salt pickling, but they still call it swan side. They call it sour pickled vegetables. Oh, I was talking about that because this also has some other pickled vegetables, but these are salt pickled vegetables. And a lot of dishes here, if you have some kind of there's a common thing here, you'll have some kind of a starch, like a rice or noodles, and then a bunch of other stuff that you just put on top of it. And then at the table or when you're eating it, you can mix it together, but they don't mix it for you. And then they'll also often have some kind of a little condiment. And these little salt pickles are a very common condiment that they'll have. They can be made out of lots of different things. It could be from carrot or from turnip or I think those are the main two. Potentially they might use some lotus root, but I don't think that's as common. But it usually ends up being like a little hard, crunchy, salty or sour kind of flavor. That's just a little condiment thing. Maybe similar to it's similar to a relish. That they just put on. And it kind of cuts through anything with a lot of grease. They'll put it in. Just as a balancing agent. In general, I don't really like it that much, those pickles, but in this dish or in things where they get mixed in, I don't mind it. I don't really like eating it by itself. But if you just get one little piece of it mixed in with a large bite of something, like, I don't mind it. It's not too strong of a flavor, but by itself, it's a very strong flavor, and it's a little overwhelming for me. All right, well, I think that's about all I've got to say about these noodles. So I'll cut this off and finish my meal.